In this talk, we're going to focus on a specific subgroup of frequency adjectives in English and argue that they quantify over stages. Some frequency adjectives, specifically occasional, odd, and rare, have been seen as posing a paradox for the relationship between hierarchy and interpretation. In the sentence in one, the occasional sailor strolled by, there's a sense that occasional, from its position as an adjective, is able to modify not only the individual next to it, but also the verbal event. The puzzle is how these adjectives are able to associate with the event as well as the individual. How frequency adjectives divide into subgroups is controversial in the literature, but we see empirically that occasional type adjectives form a unique category in that they're able to, on their own, cause a plurality of events, or pluractionality. Unlike other frequency adjectives like daily or infrequent, occasional doesn't depend on other sources of pluractionality. It's able to assert a pluractional reading even when the DP it's contained in is singular. In two, we see that the plural number signals pluractionality. In three, the adverb occasionally, infrequently, or daily do the work of pluralizing the event. The difference lies in four. Only occasional is able to create a pluractional reading here. We see this as evidence that we need to treat occasional, odd, and rare as a subgroup separate from the rest. One important empirical observation is that these sentences can only end up with a distributive reading. In five, the occasional car drove by, we can only get the reading that there's several driving by events, each performed by one car. Crucially, it cannot mean that there was a single driving by event performed by a low number of cars. Because of this obligatory distributive reading, we want to group occasional type adjectives together with the quantifier each, in that the distributive reading must be baked into the meaning of the word itself. One way to capture this has been the quantificational analysis. Zimmermann makes the observation that the event and individual aren't in an asymmetrical relationship, like what you would expect from a standard analysis of generalized quantifiers. Instead, the event and the individual are somehow more closely knit and pluralized together. Zimmermann, among others, presents an analysis involving an infrequency operator that existentially quantifies over ordered pairs of events and individuals. Zimmermann specifies a non-overlap relation to avoid the events from clumping together in time. One problem with Zimmermann's analysis is that temporality is treated as an inherent part of pluractionality, but there is data to argue against this. Sometimes the separation between events can be spatial, but the events can still be temporally overlapping. Even in these cases, we're able to use occasional type adjectives. Like when statives are used, like the one in 7, there was an occasional star in the night sky. We use this to argue that these adjectives aren't temporally anchored. A larger problem is the inability to capture the intuition that occasional type adjectives express the density of manifestations of an individual. In sentences like 8, we're not counting individual sailors, but rather the instantiation of a sailor from the perspective of the speaker, and the way in which they are instantiated is through the strolling by event. In principle, the same sailor could be involved in several of the strolling by events. Gerke and McNally provide an alternative analysis to capture this, in which occasional behaves like an adjective in that it only modifies the individual next to it, but it specifically distributes the manifestation of individual kinds. They attribute the plurality of events to context alone. But there are several reasons to believe that the connection to the verb is compositional and not just contextually derived. One such reason is that these sentences are proportionally ambiguous. In the sentence, the occasional sailor strolled by, occasional type adjectives need to count the members in the intersection of the individual set and the event set. We can see this when we use stress. If we put stress on sailors, the sentence is true, even if there are many people strolling by, but only a few of them are sailors. Conversely, if we put stress on strolled by, there can be a high number of sailors, but only a few of them are involved in a strolling by event. This proportional ambiguity shows that occasional type adjectives specifically pick out the intersection between two sets, which requires that both sets be within the scope of the adjective. An ad nominal analysis wouldn't be able to predict anything but a low number of sailor instantiations. We also see that occasional type adjectives can't just freely associate with any event nearby. For example, when occasional is in an embedded environment, it's still restricted to the closest verbal event and can't reach out to pluralize the matrix verb. In the sentence, I hope an occasional sailor strolls by, occasional can only relate to the strolling by event. It's not able to contextually connect to the verb hope, so the sentence cannot mean I occasionally hope a sailor strolls by. This again leads us to think that the event must be compositionally tied to the adjective. We want to combine distributivity in the stage reading created by occasional type adjectives by taking seriously the view that stages inherently make up ordered pairs of events and individuals. This reanalysis of stages was, to our knowledge, first presented by Barker, and it fits in neatly with Carlson's original intention of stages as not just a time slice of an individual, but as closely related to events. Uniting the event and the individual in this way helps us unite the benefits of earlier approaches, such as symmetry, plurirectionality, and distributivity, and stages. We here present our analysis of occasional type adjectives. Occasional takes two predicates P and Q, and X essentially quantifies over a set of events E, a set of individuals X, and a set of stages S. P makes up the individuals, and for all members in X and for all members in E, there exists a member of S containing the two in an ordered pair. And this pair is a stage of that individual member X. Q makes up the events, and the total set of S is low by some contextually relevant standard. With this view of stages, we're able to keep the distributive reading and the close connection between the event and the individual, while within the very same mechanism manifesting that individual. One final important point is that it's the set of stages whose members are spread out, and this vagueness means we're no longer restricted to temporality for event multiplicity, but that location can also play a role. To conclude, we have adopted Barker's reanalysis of stages as ordered pairs to explain the behavior of occasional type adjectives. We argue that these adjectives quantify over stages and thus distribute the low number of manifestations of the individual. Further, we show that occasional type adjectives need an event to assert the plurality of, and so the event must be compositionally tied to the adjective and not just contextually filled in. We believe this analysis captures all the relevant intuitions that we have about the behavior of these adjectives. Thank you.